You feeling good though, Jason?
Yeah, it's a nice day up here. So,
Where you,
how are you? Where are you all calling from, by the way? I know where Jacqueline is, but I don't know where you guys are.
we're in Florida.
Oh, all right.
hmm Like Tampa area, a little bit south of Tampa in a town called Sarasota.
Okay, I know where Sarasota is. So, is it getting springtime over there? I'm assuming so.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's spring break crazy. It just ended. So like the beaches were flooded with people. It was just chaos,
Very nice.
but in a good way. And then where are you calling in from?
I'm in Bellevue,
Bellevue.
Bellevue,
Nice.
Washington.
How is it out there? Raining?
It's not rainy right now. You can see the back window behind me. It's full on spring. As a matter of fact, like my weather app told me that this week it's going to start to rain towards the end of the week, but it's going to be in like the 70s, I think, at one point this week.
And so are you leaving Bellevue? Are you like, I'm done with the rain, or are you just moving
No,
places?
I moved to Bellevue. I was in Victoria, British
Mhm.
Columbia for 5 years.
Oh, okay. All
So
right.
I moved to Bellevue from there after the acquisition was announced.
Nice. By the way, this is the podcast. I don't know how much of a heads up you had on it, but it's just us hanging out and talking.
Oh, all right. That's easy enough for me. I love those.
Right? It's not like there's no big like intro deal. It's just us being geeky.
All right.
Mm. So I was checking out your Medium, and the first question I had was, where did you get all that artwork? All that
So
like
there's just I like urban sketching. That's one of my things. Like to relax. I do a couple of different things. One of them's write. One of them's lift weights. The other one is to draw. And I got into sketching and watercolors a while back, and urban sketching kind of took to it because, frankly, it looked like there was an easy way to get into it. You didn't need a lot of talent. You throw some lines together, slap some color down on it, and it looks pretty good. But start to do it, you realize these folks are really ridiculously talented. And I started following some folks on Instagram or various mediums, and this one person, I don't know who this person is, but they're out of China. They just go all over China and they do this one style, and I just love it. So I just follow this person. I grab some of their free domain artwork when it pops up, and I just use it for blog posts.
it's beautiful.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's just
Yeah.
you look at that and you're like, okay, yeah, that's how you know life's not fair. Sometimes someone's got that much talent, and also their dedication to it is otherworldly.
Yeah, I saw like the first one, and then I saw the second one. And I'm like, is he drawing these? Like, who is doing this?
Oh
I
no no
used
no.
I used to play around with this app called Paper,
Yep.
like Paper 53. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, you could do some pretty cool watercolor type stuff in that app.
There's this person on Instagram who I used to follow too until I like completely deleted all social media at one point. Which this person's name was like Master Vi or Master V or Master Six. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but they use micro pens, kind of like the Micron 0.05 millimeter type things, and they would just constantly draw architecture. And what this person did was they just posted every single one that they did over a 5-year period. And you could see the progression going back on their Instagram from when they just started to what they had become. And if you just found them now, you think this person is just godly talented, but you see where they start from, you can see the progression. It's kind of fascinating.
Right? No, that like draws parallels to me with leadership because I was reading your leadership stuff and I happen to really like your style. But you can watch the leaders grow and it's amazing where they go.
Well, if you do it every day too, as you're managing people or leading, I made this comment a while back at a recurring event that I had gone to for many years, which said that today I'm no different than I was 5 years ago. And then someone came up to me afterwards and said, no, you're very different than you were 5 years ago in a positive way. Like we could definitely see the progression if someone's only seen you in snapshots over the course of like once a year or twice a year or something like that. But you don't feel it every day. It's kind of interesting how the way that works.
Yeah, it's leveraging the compounding nature of time. It's like a super power to people who understand it.
Which is also why just start socking money away when you're young too. That's
Right?
I can't believe I'm in the 40s already. Like I look back, I'm like, yeah, 1999 was just the other day. I'm like, oh my god, some people were born in '99.
I know. I can remember where I was in 99, like because everybody was at the New Year's Eve party was like wondering if the world was going to end.
Yep.
Yep. And there's a few towns that like their electricity companies went out and stuff. Those people must have been freaked out, like the 3 or 4 small towns.
If there was an April Fool's Day joke to be played, it would have been right around that time.
Right? So are you usually at home working from home, or is this just because of the move?
Let's call it 50-50
Okay.
here HQ in San Francisco. I've been a distributed remote exec now going on 10 years at least.
Mm-hmm.
So GitHub is probably 60 plus, 65% plus distributed. Heroku was distributed. Canonical, the place before Heroku, was also distributed. So I've been doing this for quite some time.
Wait, so Canonical was what Heroku was before it was Heroku?
Canonical are the people who make Ubuntu Linux.
Oh, okay.
I was at Canonical for 4.5 or 5 years, Heroku for 3.5 or so years, and then GitHub. And
Oh,
all
okay.
three of the places are distributed. Canonical is 100% remote. Heroku was probably about the 65% remote, 70 or so in engineering. And then GitHub, same percentages as Heroku, 65% for the company, 70 plus in engineering.
And they just got, how long ago did they get acquired by Salesforce?
Heroku?
Yeah.
2012. So it's been a little while, actually. I think it was 2012 that they got acquired. I joined them in 2014.
You know what's funny is I've been on Heroku for a long time. But I didn't even realize they got acquired for quite a while. Like it was several years before I noticed. I don't know if that was intentional or
It
unintentional,
was
but
intentional. A lot of the branding stayed the same for quite some time.
yeah, and then they didn't change it too much. It just has this little Salesforce logo at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I had spoke to Parker last week. He's one of the co-founders of
Yeah.
Salesforce.
Nice. Yeah. Parker Harris. I only interacted with him maybe a couple of times at Salesforce, but one of the more genuine people in the industry, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the guy's otherworldly wealthy at this point, and you still don't feel it when you talk to him day in, day out. So kind of appreciate that when you're around people who let things get to their head in the industry.
Right, it was cool. We were talking about his meeting that he had like 20 minutes before our call with his lead architects and stuff. I'm like, dude, you're still killing it. It's like it's amazing. That makes me happy.
There is one story about Parker that I'll tell that I like, which is I don't think he would ever even remember this, but we were all flying to a leadership offsite for Salesforce somewhere. I think it was Palm Springs from San Francisco. Everyone was kind of coming into Palm Springs, and I saw him. He was on my flight. He was in, I think he was in like row 7 or something like that. So not first class, not flying private, not charter. He was in economy. And I remember getting on the planes, looking at him, going, "That's Parker Harris," and he's in economy with everybody else. And then there were some other people at Salesforce at the time who were in first class. Some people who chartered private to get to Palm Springs from San Francisco, which is, what is it, an hour and a half, an hour or something like that. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, no matter what happens in life, be Parker. Don't be those other folks.
Oh, I love it, dude. I love it. It's like because you want to be that genuine, authentic person. You don't want it. You don't want to change too much.
Yep.
I love that painting behind you. That is that painting a print, the artwork of the little GitHub characters, different colors.
It is. This is a sticker we have at the office, and I got this as a closing gift for the acquisition. So several of us on the exec staff and some of the VCs got this one. One of the investors, this guy named Jim Getz out of Sequoia, just commented randomly because we had a very large print of this in the office and we're walking through. He said, "I love that one. It's my favorite one." And I just made the same comment. I love it too. And next thing you know, my admin had sent one to all of us. She just got a bunch of prints done and she sent it up, and I got it like 3 or 4 weeks later. And I just randomly asked her, like, "Hey, sister, you know how I got this?" She's like, "Oh, I took care of that. I heard you and Jim talking, and I thought that'd be a really nice little gift for you all." And it's literally like one of my favorite things to get out of the acquisition.
Yeah, because it's beautiful.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Have things changed much for you since then?
Um, to a degree, day-to-day work feels a little similar. Feels similar to what it was before. Um, the Microsoft has taken a pretty hands-off approach to GitHub. We're an independent entity. Um, Much like you probably wouldn't have known that Heroku was acquired by Salesforce, as you mentioned, you probably shouldn't be able to tell that GitHub was acquired by Microsoft day in, day out. Our roadmap is largely the same as it was before. The biggest difference day to day for me is Nat Friedman has come in. He's my boss now. He's the CEO,
Mhm.
and he's an engaged CEO, which is different than GitHub's previous regime. And he is really amplifying a lot of what GitHub had been and will be. So that's the biggest change day to day there. Um, my life, my personal life has changed because once you do something of this magnitude and your name starts to get out there, people approach you for many different things. So again, kind of like B. Parker, I've got to keep remembering that all this stuff is whatever fame or flattery you get is all ephemeral no matter what. You have to kind of remember where you grew up or who you are and what you want to be, and kind of like let the noise wash away.
Yeah, like people inviting you on their podcasts and stuff. Crazy people
This
out there.
this is the fun stuff. There's some. I mean, you get random, out of left field type of things every day now. And the fun part is you get flattering job offers, like amazingly big opportunities, and a lot of folks trying to get you to replicate the success in one way or
Yeah.
fashion or form. But then you got people trying to come at you for money, or you invest this way, or all the things. And then you just have like random requests that popping out of the woodwork from either old acquaintances, old friends, or even some old family stuff. And it's
It's like
interesting.
you won the lottery.
It really it really feels that way. And I'm like, I don't think y'all understand how acquisitions really work. So
It's like Jason, buddy, pal,
yeah,
friend. Are like one of my favorite ones. I want you to come work for our company. It's going to be great. You'll do pure equity, right? And you're going to make millions of dollars. We're going to do awesome things. I
yeah,
love
it's
that.
basically writing or drawing for publicity. You're like, cool, no thanks.
So you go to GitHub and then that's like 2017, right? When you get there.
Yeah, May 31st, 2017 is when I joined.
So when you join, they were already, that's like right before the acquisition started. If an acquisition closed like recently, then they usually don't happen fast. So did you come like right into it?
So there's only so much I can talk
Oh, we
about
could not talk about this, by the
behind
way.
the
We don't
scenes.
have to.
There's, well, I can say this is that everyone in the industry probably knew what GitHub should be, what it could be. Very few people were able to come into GitHub and try to move it to what it could do, though. My job was pretty simple. I joined when it was about a $2 billion valuation. Mine was to get it ready to be acquired or IPO. Either one of those options had to be on the table. And organize it, drive it, give it a mission and vision that sounded palatable to suitors or the market. And once you show that you can be acquired and you have a palatable vision out there and there's a degree of FOMO that you've created, things happen fast.
Yeah.
So we announced the acquisition on my 1 year anniversary to the public. We announced it on my 1 year anniversary. And I would say that end to end from interest to announce was less than 6 months, and then a total of like 9 months to close the deal. So it did happen fast.
Yeah, that is actually really fast. That's cool though. So I guess where my root of my question was like when you got in, you were like instantly working in that, because if you're a senior executive at a company being acquired, so it's like you don't have an opportunity like to not be a part of that, right? Like, so I just was curious if you.
Yeah, I would say that the time I joined in May 31st, I would say that I was able to get Microsoft, Google, and others on the line probably closer to October, November. But that's when all the conversations probably happened earlier, as early as they probably did.
Oh, that's very cool. So just out of for you and me, right, and the audience, people often will ask us questions like, can you give us some advice on M&A, or can you talk to people who've done that? And it doesn't have to be, we're not going to do like specific stuff with like GitHub or anything like that. Just in general, like, you know, things to look for, what would make, I'll give you a hypothetical. If I have a company like, and I was looking to get acquired, what would make me valuable? What would you look for?
Oh, I mean, very, very general question, and it's
Yeah.
obviously going to lead to a whole bunch of it depends answers. However, I think that people can get acquired for a couple of different reasons. Let me give you a broad view sense that I have for what product really is in the world. I think I stole this. I know I stole this from someone, and I think it was Jeffrey Moore who I stole this from, which was a product comes in three different flavors. You can say you're neutralizing competition, you're optimizing what you have in the market, or you're kind of innovating. And where you are on your growth curve kind of depends on how much investment you're making in any one of those areas for your business. But M&A actually comes in the same flavors. You're trying to buy your way out of competitive situations and gaps, or you're trying to buy innovation because you've lagged, or you're trying to buy some optimization. And typically you don't buy optimization. That's not what you would spend money on. So it usually comes into the other two buckets: neutralization or innovation. And understand which one of those scenarios you're in. If you're talking to potential acquirers, or you're looking at M&A, is why are we doing this M&A, or what are they trying to get out of this? Are they thinking they're getting a market leap to leapfrog competition, or are they trying to get a catch-up play? And it depends on who's acquiring you, on which one of those modes it's in. And if you look around, many people think they're buying innovation, but what they're really doing is they're buying gap. They're trying to shore up holes in their business. That's a competitive gap. And that's pretty much, neutralization is a pretty common M&A strategy.
I like that. I like that a lot. No, because like we have a startup here and like alongside the podcast. And I didn't know what I was doing when I got into the business. It just kind of
Who
happened.
does?
Yeah. I was like, whatever. I was like, I had people knocking on the door, asking for lemonades. I was like, let's open up a lemonade stand. Right. And then I realized, oh my God, this is like an $18 billion market. There's like this whole thing. And then I started, it grew, it did whatever. And then I decided to raise capital to grow it even farther because I was like, it's growing. Look at that. That's pretty great. And then people were asking me questions like, uh, you know, what's your exit strategy, right? And so I had to do some market research. And then I started learning that you've got like all these older companies. And what will happen is some new technology will come out. And then like another, and then a competitor to that new technology will come out. And they're playing in like the $15-30 million range. And then a
Mm-hmm.
third one comes out. And then they're like, oh my gosh, they're going to steal our market share. So then big guy number one buys this one, big guy, and then what happens is you get this tension in the market where there's a supply and demand issue. There's only so many new innovative competitive companies and the big people are buying them up fast. And so when I was researching my industry, I saw that was actually happening. I was like, this is perfect timing because in like 2 years, there's like 8 or 9 of these guys that need to stay relevant. The two biggest leaders have already made acquisitions for the company that I am, like that style of business, and there's no one else. So it's gonna be like me with like 8 bidders. And I was like, that's at least right now. And so I was like, that's actually pretty cool. And that's my first entry into like M&A
Well,
stuff.
I think that you kind of nailed it on the head. It's like you see this happen. What happens? I mean, all of us are humans. We're all kind of driven by the same type of dynamics at play. And I I think if you just understand the human dynamic at play is wins and losses, fear of missing out, competitive situations, and all those other things really do come into play. And one company buys another company. Next thing you know, three competitors are saying, "What just happened?" And they're trying to react, and they're reacting quicker. And obviously, the faster you make decisions with less information, the worse that decision might be too. And all of a sudden, this froth happens in the market. It's a weird frenzy that can actually happen when a competitive situation emerges.
Yeah, and it ends up awesome sometimes for for parties involved. So let's change the topic a little bit. I'm curious, because you are remote some of the time. I'm curious to how you grow and develop like your next generation of leaders, like technology leaders. Like I saw you write a lot, and you're very smart about culture and leadership. But how do you do that on like a tactical level?
So it's The one skill I find that you need to be remote more than anything is the willingness to pick up the phone, as I say, which is you've got to be able to jump on a Hangout or a Zoom or a phone call way back when to be able to do it. And video has changed the game entirely for remote. Like when you were just doing audio conferences, it was much, much, much harder. And I don't think it was nearly as successful. And no matter what anyone says, IRC and Slack and all the other ones are not an acceptable alternative for video. And I find that if you're not willing to do that, you want to stay async entirely and just use text-based communication. It's very, very difficult to do that. You have to have mixed modes. So you've got to be able to write, you've got to be able to async write and consume, and you've got to be able to jump on video to do this, to hash things out. If you're able to do that, I find that all of them kind of wrapped together allow you to have a pretty good experience. Every once in a while, I think you should get together in person, but I don't think it's necessary to be doing that every week or even every month. And your mileage may vary, but your willingness to get on a video call like this is key to doing it.
So you mainly like coach your leaders through like one-on-ones when you're on video and communicating like
One-on-ones, we do Slacks back and forth just to do check-ins, and the first time you ever sense any sort of miscommunication on even a back and forth of a text-based communication, you're like, got to jump on the phone. Let's go right now. Let's jump on the video hangout, because it's the most important thing is to clear up small issues before they become big ones, and then also talk through scenarios. And if you're going to do the scenario stuff, talk through them live, because nuance is very difficult in text. Talk through them when you can see the other person.
Ask my wife. Right? Nuance is very difficult in text. So you don't get to where you are without being able to understand this concept of stepping outside of your comfort zone, right? And so if we've got some, a lot of our audience, first-time team leaders, all the way up to leaders of leaders, and then some CTO, but a whole lot of first-time tech leaders. What sort of advice would you, give or share, or a story you would share about stepping outside of your comfort zone?
Oh wow, I could go on for days in a kind of meandering, probably no real point at the end of it type of thing on this one. And I do like to talk about this stuff. Maybe if I flip it around and say, sorry, what was that?
One good story, one good, stepping outside your comfort zone story that yields a positive result.
Oh, well, I would say for me, like obviously the acquisitions one, it's not very often that you try to talk about stuff like that, stepping out of my comfort zone, but obviously the payout was huge. I would say the first time I really jumped into management is kind of one of the first ones. I'm what you might call a reluctant leader. If I look back on my career, I jumped into management really, really young. I went back to IC, jumped again, went back, jumped, went back, kept doing it over and over again. And finally, there was a point in time when I just kind of like burned the boats on engineering leadership and just went all in on it. And I remember the time I did it was because I was so incredibly frustrated with what was going on around me. And it was one of those moments where I loved the company, I love what we were doing, but everything was a mess. And it felt, and like generally speaking, most things are on fire, or there's some degree of emberness that is happening, smoldering, if you will, that is happening at all times. But this one felt particularly on fire. And I stepped up and I said I wanted to go help. How can I help? And I went and I had a very uncomfortable conversation. This is the stepping out of the comfort zone part. I was young and I had a very uncomfortable conversation with the CTO at the time. And you could see that this person almost had this sense of relief, because this person was like, God, I know everything's on fire and I have no idea what to do. What can we do? And you could see that there was like this guard let down moment where I was like, I don't know. You don't know either. So let's just talk about some of the things and prioritize top 5 that we should go after. And that was my first real jump into management professionally, without just kind of like dabbling at it, which led to executive management, 6-8 months later, and then the rest is history.
Nice. So I like that, because what you're describing is you saw an issue and you looked around and you're like, hey, nothing's happening. And then you stepped up outside of your comfort zone and you made some changes and figured out how to solve the problem.
Well, in that one in particular, the uncomfortable conversation with the superior was the really step outside your comfort zone one. But there's a way in which you can do those. I like to say that every conversation is a chance for net improvement or decline in a relationship. And there's a way to have a difficult conversation with someone where you become closer and stronger formed bonds outside of it, even if it's like, you're not going to work at this company anymore. Or you can have that same conversation, and next thing you know, you've got a villain for life that's coming after you. And the skill is finding out how to have those conversations. And most people don't know how to have those conversations. And I think it's an actual skill to develop difficult conversations.
Is there like a book for that, or?
Well, there's a book called Crucial Conversations, which is a good one to read up on. There's also, candidly, my son is autistic. I have 3 children, and my oldest is autistic, and my second has many learning disabilities. And I've read a lot about concept called social thinking, but also how to express yourself for kids on the spectrum and how they communicate. And for some reason, for me, when I was reading a lot about communication patterns in autistic children, as well as social thinking theory, I was able to figure out that there is modes of communication that most of us don't employ, and we take shortcuts through most of our conversations. And if we don't take some of the harder portions of the conversations and develop those skills, we're actually doing all of ourselves a disservice. And we're trying to trade on social norms, if you will. And that only applies usually to very specific geolocales or maybe a nation or two. But I've lived all over the world, and there's many people in this country who don't or work with who are not born in your state or your county or your country, and the social norms are not the same. So sometimes you actually have to have a deeper ability and sophistication in communication than you normally would, and one normally would. So yeah, I think you have to develop that.
So you've lived in about 3 different countries?
Yeah, United States, Australia, and Canada, and then back to the US. And then I've worked with people from all over the world, obviously.
Oh, nice. Did you just do that because you were remote and you could, or were there offices there and you?
So life happens sometimes, we were young. My wife and I, we had 1 kid at the time. Something happened in our life, and we said, "Hey, we want to make a change. Let's move to Australia."
Yeah.
So she looked for a job. She figured out what she could do there. I ended up at Canonical. It was either going to be a remote company or nothing for me. I was running engineering for a startup, but we were kind of blowing up the situation. And if I could find something remote and able to do it, I would. If I couldn't, then we were still going to do that. And so that's how we ended up over in Australia. Stayed there for a couple of years, almost 3. Then we found out about our son being autistic, and we were like, hey, we got to get back to North America, but let's look up and down the West Coast for the best possible situation for us. Found Victoria, fell in love, went to go do that for 5 years, and then, again, life happens, and here we are in the United States after the acquisition was done.
I love it. And you guys are happy where you're at?
Yeah, we're pretty happy. The kids love it. My wife likes being back in the States. One thing that I think that particularly Americans either don't learn because we grew up here, or maybe forget if we traveled abroad, is how easy things are in the US and relatively how cheap things are. So there are obviously some things that are harder. I personally prefer the Australian medical system to the US medical system. It's got a mix of public and private. So there's like amazing social safety nets, but also the ability to jump outside of it and do private if you need to or want to. But man,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's actually quite a good system in my opinion. And but everything else is a little bit harder there. And same thing in Canada. But like gas is cheaper, groceries are cheaper. As ridiculously expensive as real estate is here in some cities, it tends to be cheaper here, or at least relative to income levels. Amazon.com is a thing in the United States, and it's not a thing in other countries. Amazon.ca is, but assume that there's 1/100th the inventory on Amazon.ca as opposed to Amazon.com. And, it's just these little tiny knock-on effects. So it's nice to be back.
What age range are your kids?
11, 8, and 5.
11, 8, and 5. Nice. I've got 18 months and one that's 4 weeks. Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
You're in it.
Yep. So you know what my life's like right now.
Yeah. And I'm laughing because is that coffee you're drinking at, what is it, 7 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock at night on yours? Because you need it actually, I would imagine.
Yep. I used to think when I was young, I was like, how could the parent fall asleep on the couch? Like, how could you just fall asleep? It's like the middle of, like, how could you do that? And then I thought I had a sleeping problem because I couldn't fall asleep on demand. I have 2 kids. You can fall asleep anywhere you want.
Yeah. Having kids is a remarkable perspective for the entire world. And
Yes.
yes.
So let's talk about this. We had this little inside conversation at the office. I mean, it was a small debate, but I'm curious to get your perspective on it. We were discussing personal development, like professional development, like improving yourself, and whether that's the responsibility of the individual or the company to improve the individual.
So I find that this is actually quite an interesting conversation because I think it goes to mindset all around the individual as well as the corporate body. So here's what I say. Assume that no one is going to be responsible for you the way that you can be responsible for you. And assume that you have to take your responsibility into your hand. However, look for places that care for you the way that you would want to be cared for. And if I look at it that way, my job as an executive leader is to try to provide opportunities or things, growth opportunities or forums in which people can do those things. But I'm also looking for people who are going to own it themselves, because one, that shows a drive on their own and a more assertive attitude or approach to their own care and cultivation. If that's how they're going to care for themselves, I likely transfers to other aspects of the job as well. And there's a statement I live by, and the longer I've been getting into my career, I like to look for people this way. You try, I forget who said this one, but it said, you try to find people you need to rein in, not people you need to motivate.
Ooh.
And, I think my job is actually to motivate and inspire. But if that's my job. But although if I'm looking for a trait in a person, I should be looking for a person who I don't need to do that for as much as you might think you need to. And if you combine those two things, magic can happen, because you find, leadership that might care, but you also have people who are really, self-driven. There's a lot of stuff that you can conquer in that approach.
Yeah, it's
So
like
to answer that question more directly, I think it's both parties. If I were to lean, it's going to be probably, I'd say the individual should absolutely do it, because there's very few people in life will care about them the way they care about themselves.
Yeah, I loved your explanation. That's, first of all, that was my side of it, because individual ownership's like everything. And the logic behind that for me is that if it's your fault, then you have the capacity to do something about it. But if it's outside of your control, you put yourself in a lost situation. Like, you can't do anything about it because it's outside of your control. And so that's one of the
There's very few things in life that you can control anyway, right?
right.
So like most of life is like a random number generator, it feels like. However, you can take control over at least your education, not your experiences even, because you might not get opportunities provided to you even if you apply for them, but you can learn and you could read and you could research. You can at least take control of information that flows into you and how you reflect on it.
Yes. Yeah, and you can that's the beautiful thing about humans. Like, a horse is a horse. Like, it can do horse things. Like, we can study, we can learn art, we can learn to draw those great drawings that you were talking about earlier. We can do anything that we want, with our brains, if we put the time into it and execute like the discipline to do so.
Another way to say this, some people ask me all the time about maybe a mentor or things like that in my life, getting to this point. And I have had only one person at one point in my career who I think even cared for me as a species called human, let alone as an individual person. And I had very short period of time with that person. It was less than 2 years, and I enjoyed every minute with it, particularly as time has gone on. but in a 20 plus year career, I've never had it except for that one opportunity. So if people are asking me how to find a mentor or any of those things, it's quite hard actually, because it's very difficult in our industry that people assume that someone else is going to provide them with opportunities. And I did that early on. I assumed the good work that I did was going to showcase, or everyone else was going to just look at all the work and just throw opportunity my way. It doesn't work that way typically. And it's unfortunate it doesn't work that way, but it doesn't. And the reality of the situation is, whether you use the word should or shouldn't, like I shouldn't have to do that, or it should work that way. Should is a useless word. You have to actually figure out what the reality of the situation is and how to navigate and get through it. Now, if you're in a position to change the entire narrative of the industry or the situation or whatever, that's different. Most people are not that, including myself. I don't control my own career at Microsoft. Things have to fall my own way. People have to take a liking to me. There has to be the right political environment for me to achieve success past my current gig. I don't control that. I'll control the small few things I can, and everything else is going to be luck.
Yeah. But that's the beauty of it, because there are things you can control.
So I'm going to take ownership over those, and I'm going to control them.
Yeah, I like it. It's almost amorphous. Like you can sort of control certain objects in the environment, but you can't guarantee the exact outcome, but you can put everything in the right area and do what you can do, and then have a healthy environment. And you're confident that if you have that healthy environment, a positive result will yield.
Well, there's this comic I love about climate change,
Okay.
which is there's these two folks at a conference room full of it looks like other scientists, and they're speaking to each other, and they're talking about all these different initiatives that need to do to combat climate change. And it said, hey, what if we do all this stuff and we make the world a better place for nothing? And I think of that when I think about some of these things, because if you and I are working at the same place, and the inputs are generally the same, we're taking control of our careers the same way in our learnings, and we're progressing, the outcomes are not guaranteed to be the same. You and I might have different outcomes. You might end up as a CTO of the place, and I may end up on a project that never had success for whatever reason. But that doesn't mean that it was worthless effort on either of our parts, because you have to play it out over the time horizon of careers as well. And even if the outcome was not the same, it's not fair, generally isn't fair, but there's also going to be a moment in time where we are better than we were before. And that to me is like the broader goal.
Yeah. And while you're saying that, it's reminding me, that whole money one, if you'd rather have a penny and double it, or you'd rather have just a few. Well, if you look at the math of that, and this was an interesting one for me because I did it the other day, you don't actually get the payoff greater until like the last 2 days. Like it's always a better option to take the money up front until those like very last moments. And so like that's, for me, that's when I see that, my perspective is that's motivating. Like I'm going to keep improving and keep doing that step. Even like what you said, some might end up as a CTO, some might end up as a failed project. I'll say there's some gold in that failure of that project, and now let me go at it again. And eventually over my career, it'll compound, and I'll just get better at identifying opportunity, better at adjusting the environment and improving myself. And I've yet to meet a person or read a book of someone that's tried really, really hard for a really long time and not have had a lot of success.
Well, it's this classic, I think we all see them, which is, when do people have success in their life? And obviously some people have immense success really early on, and they're a one-hit wonder and never have another success after that. But they can have huge monetary wins and they never have to worry about that again. And then you have others who achieve what you might think of as their life's work in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it's staggering for people in their 20s to think like, you look around Silicon Valley and San Francisco, and Lyft IPO yesterday, and a bunch of other things that'll be happening, and you have some mid to late 20s people thinking, oh my God, I'm like failing at my career because I'm not X, Y, or Z because of who else is around there. And it's a skewed perspective. Sometimes the situation dictates the outcome. You just have to prepare, find the opportunities, be prepared for when you're in that situation, take advantage of that point.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I had this transition in my life about, 5 or 7 years ago, when I had some early success with my building applications. I made some really good money really early on. And then I didn't have that much success. And then I had a little bit, and then I did like all right. And then like, but I didn't want to just do all right. Like I had early success, so I didn't want to just do all right. And then I started thinking a lot and reading and, finding experts and things like that have gone really far in their lives. And inevitably they're always writing about it when they're like in their 60s, right? But I decided to make a mental change from investing in the exception based investment, which is I'm going to build the next $100 million app, right? And I'm going to kill myself and I'm going to compromise my health and I'm going to do everything and write as much code as I possibly can. And I know if I do it, like I've got a shot at huge money and being a household name. And then I realized, look, all these people say it took forever and you have to play this incredibly long game. So now instead of, binging all night on coding and ignoring my health, I'm going to eat right, work out, invest in myself, figure out this professional development, learn how to communicate better, understand the business world better. And I'm going to play a 20-year game because that's what all the successful people do. And if you're doing the 80-20 thing, I'm investing. This is our life here, man. Jason, this is our entire lives. You get like one shot at a lifelong thing. And so I'm like, if I'm going to make this one investment, I'm not going to do exception-based thinking. That's playing the lottery. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the rule. And I'm going to invest and do the hard work over extremely long periods of time and know that if I fail on the rule, I will be proud of myself.
I can appreciate that approach. I think that Silicon Valley teaches us to try to swing for the fences, and obviously there's incentives at play. So if you're on your side of the fence and there's an investor on the other side of the fence, their incentive is actually to get you to play the exception-based game because that's how their game is played. But if you're on your side of the fence, play the rule-based game. That's your side of the fence. That is the higher chance of outcome, a successful outcome is that.
Yeah, it's working. It took about 5 years before I first started seeing the signs of it working, but it was okay because I was healthier and like more fit and I felt better about myself. And it was just, I adjusted my expectations rather than being stressed about not hitting it all the time. I'm like, oh, I'm only a few years into like a 20-year plan. I'm good. Like, yeah. So,
Yeah, the longer
man,
term,
I like
I think the longer term plan is a healthier one. Mentally, physically, emotionally, family wise. You have to also balance it, in my opinion, for what you want to do out of life. Some people actually want to play the exception based game, and I think that more power to them. And when I was younger, I thought I wanted to as well. And I decided that I was going to do it one more time with GitHub. But after that, I don't know.
What are you most excited about today? Like, what's the thing that you're probably the move being over?
Yeah, that'll be nice when the moves are over. Things that get me out of bed in the morning are still, I like what I do. I like what GitHub is building. People who see what GitHub has slowly released over the last couple of, let's say a year and a half or so since I joined, can probably put together what we're slowly going to do over the next 5 years as well. And that to me is very interesting. I like developing the future, which is a little bit opaque to most people. I quite like that. And I'm pretty excited about being able to do that and continue to be able to do that. I consider it a privilege.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of GitHub, by the way. I've been on there for 2009.
Very early, yeah, nice.
Yeah, and it's been great. And I mean, pretty much since the moment since I don't know, since I started writing big boy technology and not just small fun projects, it became in working with teams. Like it took me so long to figure out that there was this thing, like another technology that did that, because for me, Git was like the only thing, but there was other versions of it and stuff like that. But I was like, oh man, if I, I wish I matured as an engineer. Like I wish I would have known about, you should have seen my face the day I figured out what tests were. I was like, this would have been so useful.
I'm old enough to remember the days when we were having like source safe or perforce or clear case discussions. And then I was at a startup company that was on CVS trying to make the case to move to Subversion. I was like, oh my goodness, these are tedious conversations, branching and tagging conversations. And I remember when GitHub first came out, I looked at it and I was just like, oh my God, this is going to change everything.
Yes. Are you doing any public speaking in the near future?
I do a lot of internal stuff at GitHub and Microsoft. I will be doing, I don't think I have any public things coming up. I just got done with South by Southwest. I have a CTO summit in New York, I think in June.
That's Peter Bell, right?
I'm not sure if it's that one or if it's a different one. There's two of them that are going on at the same time.
Oh, are there really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Let me know about like who organizes. Do you know who organizes the other one?
I think it's Benchmark Capital actually who's doing it.
Benchmark Capital?
Yeah, I think that's maybe who was doing it. Well, I'll find out later and send it to you.
Yeah, I kind of geek out about that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always give the same type of talk. So if you ever look up one of the old CTO summits in San Francisco from Peter Bell, I give the same type of talk, which is about building organizations that can scale and thrive over time. So it's all the same type of talk. Most people are, I find that when they're building companies, they try to do things that worked for them in the past, not realizing that that's going to break at a scale that they're probably not anticipating at the moment. So I talk about how to do things and how to plan for future growth that way.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And so that's like
you've been through it.
Yeah. And that obviously, I mean, it's like if you gave that, back in the day, right, or a few years ago, now when you're giving it, it's like a whole different, you got all that added experience on top of it.
Yeah, and my wife looks at it this way. She's always wanted me to continue writing. That's what she likes that I do, and she wants me to keep writing about that experience. Like all the GitHub, if anything, GitHub is like a pressure test of a lot of those theories or thesis that you put into practice at smaller places or in different situations. Because GitHub is kind of like the pinnacle of those things. It was, VC. Largely VC funded. It was in an interesting spot in its history, a lot of positives and negatives, and to get it out this way is a validation of a lot of the principles.
When's the book coming?
It'll have to come after I don't need to work or want to work anymore, I'll say.
That's good. Well, we've got this book coming out, working on it, and it's The Habits and Patterns of the Greatest Technology Leaders on the Planet. And essentially, it's just like, Salesforce CTO, you're Kevin Scott over at Microsoft CTO, like all these different technology leaders, VPs of engineering, SVPs, CTOs. And I took like the best clips, like from all the, 500 conversations I've had with them, and I'm putting into a book, and I'm organizing it by like, here's like the best bits on like culture, and here's the best things on like hiring. And so if you'd like, I'd include some of your content in that, and then now you get a book.
You've got the blog post. You can freely adapt any one of those, or we can talk about something else offline if you want.
Yeah, no, I just think first of all, the coolest thing about all of this is quick backstory about me. Started programming at 8, been writing code for about 17 years, knew nobody, like 4 or 5 people until 2 years ago, and now I know like hundreds of people. And it blows my mind because people are always like, why are you so excited? Why do you talk so much? I'm like, because I didn't say anything for 17 years.
Nice.
Yeah. So now that I get to, hang out and talk with people like you about leadership and technology and all the cool things that they're doing, it's super exciting. So I just like to include people in projects that we're doing, and I get to travel around the world and speak. And like, I go to Colorado tomorrow morning. I was in San Francisco last week. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. So if I'm ever out in the Bellevue area, I will
go basically 50-50 at this point. So
between SF and Bellevue?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I ran the bridge.
Oh yeah, nice.
It was scary, dude. Have you been on the bridge?
I've been on the bridge in cars. I don't know if I would go on foot.
You want to talk about, like, I had the best Tony Robbins thing in my head. I was like, you do not look over that edge. Where you look is where you will go. I was like writing a leadership talk in my head, because it is scary. The rail is like, waist high, and there's people on their bikes coming, and there's cars over here, and then you hear the water, and then
the wind can whip up a little bit too.
Oh, dude.
I remember I was standing, I don't remember where this was, but I was standing on way up in the building, and it had one of those plexiglass or glass-based floors where you can look down below you, and it was just the street. And they're just thinking, nope, that's not for me. So you all have fun with that. I'm just going to be over here hanging out by myself.
I'm glad there's a personal growth wall there, because that wall is going to keep me alive.
That's not for me. You're all good. I know what I'm about.
Awesome. Jason, this has been fantastic, man. I'm so glad that we got a chance to hang out and talk.
Well, thanks, Joel. This has been fun.
Yeah, Jake and